Good morning and welcome to I think Cambridgeshire's finest Marsh Orchid site, Fulbourn Fen. Came here last year, blew me away. Never seen so many Marsh Orchids, so this is the long-awaited return visit. Should be good. Marsh Orchids are in flower. This is a wet flower meadow fed by chalk-laden streams. It's not going to have dried out in the current troublesome drought, so it should be good. Southern marsh, common spotted, early marsh, might get the odd bee orchid, certainly will get hybrids, and that'll be the theme for today without a doubt. Is it or isn't a hybrid between common spotted and southern marsh? But who cares? You never know quite what you're going to find here. You get a right mixed bag, but yeah, looking forward to this one. Should be good. Kicking off with a bog standard southern marsh orchid, just for reference. These threw me a little bit last year. This is another southern marsh orchid. This is just a paler form. There's not a lot of variation in southern marshes. They're either dark purple or this sort of light purple mauve coloured, of which you don't get so many. A small common spotted orchid. Okay, this is where the fun starts, because that is full-on common spotted orchid, or at least it looks like a full-on common spotted orchid, but there's no spots on the leaves at all. If I give the stems a squeeze, I don't know if they're pretty solid actually, but so in every sense that is a common spotted orchid, but it isn't. It's a hybrid with the southern marsh orchid, otherwise known as Dactylorhiza cross grandis, and I won't be repeating that too much, but it's a grandis hybrid, the most common of all orchid hybrids. It's a nice one actually. Most of them sort of swing more towards southern marsh than common spotted, but this would on the face of it look like a common spotted orchid, but it isn't. Well, there you go. I wasn't even sure I'd see a bee orchid today. That's the first one I've seen this year. Nice to land on one early. And another of these common spotted orientated hybrids. Again, there's nothing on the leaves, no spots at all, and it's a solid stem, so it's a right mixed bag. It's a hybrid, another of the grandis hybrids. Nice little common spotted, with the sort of leaves you would expect on common spotted. An interesting little duo here really. There's a pure southern marsh orchid there, but right in front of it, down the front here, get it in focus. I mean, the flower shape of that says that's a common spotted orchid. No spots on the leaves, so it's a hybrid, but if you look closely, the flowers are very prominent, 3 lobes on them. So there's definitely common spotted in there. Compared with the parent plant. quite a nice pale form of southern marsh orchid, although it's pale at the bottom and darkens as it goes up. It's probably fading at the bottom is a more accurate description, but it's a pure southern marsh orchid, that one. Very strong markings on that one in terms of the white throat, southern marsh orchid. It's a very vibrant southern marsh. Common spotted. Could be a hybrid, but I'm going to say common spotted. Common tway blade. Not too many common tway blades in this field. It's a bit damp. But I remember them being a few. Remember there being a few last time I was here. This is the first one I've come across today. And the second one. It's quite nice to actually find pure southern marsh orchids and not hybrids. There's no doubting about this one. It's an absolute classic in flower shape and flower colour southern marsh orchid. It's taken me ages to find the first early marsh orchid. There will be plenty more across the field, but up at this end this is the first and only one so far. Very pale. Second bee orchid. The third one. Lovely colour in that one. It's an interesting threesome there. I mean, the one at the back is definitely a southern marsh orchid. This one, let's get it in focus. I mean, the flowers, it's a pale form of southern marsh, but the flower shape is definitely southern marsh. And down the bottom there are spots on the leaves, so that's really the first hybrid I've seen which is kind of southern marsh orientated in the flower, but is a hybrid. Another one with the classic southern marsh flower shape. There's no sort of three separate lobes that you get on a common spotted. It's a classic southern marsh flower shape, but again down the bottom there you've got the spots on the leaves. So it's another sort of southern marsh orientated Grandice hybrid. Just going to keep this one as a record to check when I get back home. It's an early marsh orchid, and I think it may just have got sort of, I don't know, a bit washed out, perhaps gone over a little bit. There's very little patterning on it, and there are various rare forms of early marsh orchid that have this sort of creamy white colour. I doubt I'm lucky enough that this is one of them, but I'm going to capture it and ask people who know more than I do. A couple of what look like classic common spotted, particularly the one on the left. It's a wide flower. There are three distinct sections with a central lobe sort of poking down, and everything's right for common spotted, but again completely spotless leaves, so it's a hybrid. You'd never guess from just the flower, which is what makes these so difficult to identify. Twin tway blades. Saw a few of these last year, absolutely stunning early marsh orchids with this incredibly pink hue at the top of them on the sort of newly opened flowers. Really, really nice. Another stunningly pink variant of early Marsh Orchid. Saw a few of these last year. Absolute belters, very rare. White form of the early Marsh Orchid, variety Leucantha. Very nice. And that's a second one in the same patch. Just considering how rare they are, it's pretty remarkable. Spectacular colouring on this southern Marsh Orchid. Sort of catches the eye from a distance. Very nice bee orchid plant, well into flowering. Another of these incredibly strongly marked plants that scream out common spotted orchid but which have no spots on their leaves at all. Excuse me, Mr. Hoverfly. But yeah, it's a hybrid. Very nice hybrid as well. I must admit, as I said when I was over in Norfolk and saw a few of these, the pale form of the southern Marsh Orchid I find far more attractive than the more common up this way, sort of darker colour. It's a very nice specimen. Not hugely dissimilar to this one, but this is, well, it's a classic common spotted orchid, complete with spots. Common spotted. I really like the leaves on this one. Let's get them in focus. Great leaves. Well, I think putting aside the bee orchids, which are always great to see, and the white form of early Marsh, which I knew I would see, I think my orchid of the day is this, because I just love these pale southern Marsh orchids. I wish they grew around Peterborough, which they don't, unfortunately. But yeah, I think they're just really classy plants and a lovely colour form of the southern Marsh. Very nice. Another very boldly marked plant, and it's a Grandees hybrid, southern Marsh cross common spotted. You'd never guess, but completely clear, spotless leaves. Still not sure about these early Marsh orchids. They're either going over and somehow just losing all their markings, or I mean, it could be one of the rarer variants that don't have those markings. So I look forward to getting home and asking some opinions on that. I doubt I'm going to be lucky enough to have picked up something unusual, because there's quite a lot of these. But yeah, it's interesting. It definitely doesn't look the same as the others. And there is one of the others. A very sort of nice pink blush early Marsh orchid with markings. That's an absolute clonker of a pale southern marsh, really, really nice. That's the third all white leucantha form of early marsh. Starting to go over. Still very nice. Well, there you have it, Fulbourn Fen. Yeah, if you're ever over the Cambridge way and you like your orchids, particularly your marsh orchids, as you can see over my shoulder here, this site has got hundreds, and you know, we've seen them all. 5 different species that I saw last year: the southern marsh, early marsh, common spotted, common twayblade, bee orchid. They're all here. Saw the white form, the leucantha form of early marsh orchid. That's the rarity here. That's the big rarity here, and a few hybrids, but not as many. And I think that's not so much down to the plants as me. I think you learn as you go along, and you stop calling everything a hybrid just because it looks slightly different to the norm. Yeah, I actually didn't find that many hybrids today, so that probably makes a bit more sense. So it's still quite a complex subject, really, to sort of pick out what is and what isn't a hybrid. But I hope some of what I did made sense. But it's still a cracking site. It's never as good second time around because you're not going to get blown away. You know what's coming, but it's still a mighty impressive site, and well worth, you know, half an hour to an hour of your time if you're over here. Fulbourn Fen, look it up. Okay, I'm just doing a sort of timeout section here on the hybrid between common spotted orchid and southern marsh orchid. I drove home from Fulbourn Fen this morning, about a 45-minute journey back home, and I thought, well, you know, I'll use the time to work out how I describe how to identify these orchids, so I can do a little snippet. And I got home and yeah, I completely failed. And you know, you go on social media now for orchid fanatics, and nobody can really agree on a tried and tested way unless you're a biologist and can do DNA testing. But I have my way of doing things, and a way that gives me confidence. So all I can really do is share it with you. You know, there's plenty of people who say, well, no, you know, I'd go a different route, but this is how I do it, and I'll try my best, perhaps with the aid of the odd picture to my side here, to try and explain it. And it's a tough one for a couple of reasons with this hybrid. First of all, one of the parents is the common spotted orchid, and the common spotted orchid is so damn variable. It's so damn variable. It is not guaranteed to be in any particular flower form. There's some things that a common spotted orchid must have, but the rest of it is variable. And textbooks will tell you that the flower of a common spotted orchid is of a certain style with 3 distinct lobes and a central lobe that is always prominent beyond the others, but it's not true. It really isn't true. I've seen enough common spotted orchids that break the rules. So it's such a variable plant that you just can't base too much on that. And that's one of the parents of this hybrid. Problem number 2 is that despite the fact that old textbooks will tell you that this hybrid is sterile, it's now widely accepted that it's not sterile. It can cross back against parents, it can cross back against another hybrids, and it's a bit like a family tree. You know, if you're searching your family tree and you go back 8 generations to great granddad, and you find he was Irish, you know, you suddenly discover there's a bit of Irish in you, even though you can't really see a whole lot of evidence now. Or with these orchids you possibly can, but it could have been decades ago that they first crossed and produced the hybrid, which in turn since then, possibly even every year, has crossed with something else. So you still get a mixture, but it's sometimes hard to pick up the elements of one parent against the other. So it is meant to be tricky, and it is tricky, but there are things that you can look out for. Now, the hybrid, it has its own name. It's meant to be the commonest of all hybrids amongst orchids, which, you know, all hybrids are rare, all orchids are rare, so don't beat yourself up if you've not seen one. It has its own name. It's I'm going to get this one right. Dactylorhiza cross grandis. I refer to it as the grandis orchid. So That's as far as I'm going to go with that name from this point on with it. But yeah, the Grandis orchid. Well, I just want to show you something here. It's just happened to be on my desk. Let me see this. Right, it's my money tin. Put all my change in here for Christmas. But it's one of these where you can rotate, put different bodies on it. And I saw this the other day. I thought, you know, it's very much how I go about spotting these hybrids, because, you know, it's all about getting the top, which might be the flower, coordinated with the middle, which could be the stem, and the bottom, which are the leaves. And unless you get all three of those lined up, you've probably got a hybrid. So it's just a point of needing to understand what you should expect to see if the plant is not a hybrid. So for instance, if it's a common spotted orchid, don't worry too much about the flower on the common spotted. Go for the leaves. You know, common spotted orchids have spotty leaves, right? Big spots, little spots. They've got to have spots on their leaves, right? So for the common spotted side of things, look for the spots on the leaves. They're also meant to have a narrow, firm stem, whereas the Southern Marsh has a hollow stem. But it's the leaves that you need to hang on to from the common spotted perspective. You know, if there's spots on the leaves of the plant you're looking at, there is common spotted in it, which means it's either common spotted, full stop, or it's a hybrid. It can't be a Southern Marsh orchid, because Southern Marsh orchids don't have spots at all. The only thing really on a Southern Marsh orchid side that you sort of say, well, it's got to have that, apart from no spots on the leaves, and apart from it's supposed to have a hollow stem, which it has, but the hybrid, it can be a bit sort of half and half, is that the colour palette for a Southern Marsh orchid is dark purple, light purple or mauve, and white, and it'll always be that. There's no variation really. So, you know, to start the ball rolling, you're looking for a flower that's got those combinations, a sort of dark purple or mauve background, white throat, and spots down the middle. And the spots will be down the middle, small spots down the middle of the plant. They don't spread out to the sides. There's no sort of heavy markings going right down to the bottom or to the sides or at the top. It's just a narrow run of small spots down the middle. So if you see a sort of mauve purple plant with small spots going down the middle and nothing else, it's a Southern Marsh orchid. You can look at the leaves to show that, make sure they've got no spots on, but it's a Southern Marsh orchid. But when you see a plant with the same colour palette, but there's more going on in terms of spots, you see lines, you see all sorts going on, as you do on a common spotted, where it's just all over the place. If you're seeing that, but with that colour palette of dark purple, mauve and white, you should be down on your knees, because your alarm should have gone off, and you should at that stage be looking for verification. And at that stage you should be looking down, are the spots on the leaves, aren't the spots on the leaves, and go from there. And you've still got to make a judgment call. There could be spots on the leaves simply because it is a common spotted orchid, but if it's got that colour palette, it's almost certainly got Southern Marsh in it, because the common spotted can get close to that colour palette, but not as consistently as Southern Marsh does. So I would say anything that's got that sort of colour scheme has got Southern Marsh in it. But as I say, use the leaves to verify, and look for bringing all those components together to try and determine, well, okay, that doesn't go with this doesn't go with that. That's all you need to do to say that's a hybrid. You don't need to understand the rest. All you need to understand is that can't be Southern Marsh because it's got spots. It can't be common spotted because it hasn't got spots. So go on that way. I mean, at Fulbourn today I was looking at leaves more than I was looking at flowers, because that's a better starting point. But that's just me. You can still go by flower. You know, we naturally tend to look at flowers first, but look for the colour palette. Look for the typical Southern Marsh colour palette, but look for patterns on there that don't conform to that neat bunch of narrow spots going down the middle. If it doesn't conform to that, you should be looking for more, because the chances are almost certainly that is a hybrid. It's unlikely to be a full-on common spotted, because it just doesn't reach that particular colour palette. So yeah, that's kind of it. It may sound confusing, but just the more you do it, the more you'll work it out, and never try to get 100%. You get to 95%, that's good enough. It doesn't matter if someone else says, I don't think it is. There's no definite science out there, so just look for those conformity of characteristics, and where you find a breach, where they're just not compatible with one another, you've got a hybrid. And if you know a better explanation than that, then let me know, because that's about as good as I can do.